Ready for some college football?
Yeah.
All right. So first, Michigan State's head football coach Mel Tucker has been suspended by the university without pay amid an investigation into accusations of sexual harassment. He is alleged to have made sexual comments and sexual acts while on a phone call with a sexually harassed activist who Michigan State had hired, specifically the football team had hired to speak with the team and eventually acted as an honorary captain during the 2022 season. A hearing is scheduled for October 5th and 6th to determine if Tucker violated the school's sexual harassment and exploitation policy. So, JT, the question here, should Mel Tucker have been fired instead of suspended without pay?
This is such a unique situation. So I want to make sure, because I've been reading all the stories about this from multiple publications, and it's just wild. I just want to make sure that I got this all correctly. I want to put this out there. So allegedly, this is what Tucker is saying, and this is what I pulled from the Title IX report. They had 27 late night calls with an average of 30 minutes. It's a long time. Mel Tucker is saying it's consensual and that she was, quote, looking for a sugar daddy. And of course, Brenda Tracy says that none of this is true. It wasn't consensual. And the text messages that they had between each other during this period of time somehow have disappeared. So I think they can't find hers, and Mel Tucker might not be releasing his, however that's going, but they're gone and we don't know what's on them. And also, Mel Tucker at some point informed Tracy that they weren't going to be requiring her services to come out and speak to Michigan State players. For those who don't know, like Brenda Tracy, sexual assault advocate, goes around to universities and basically talks to players and tells them, why they shouldn't be doing this, what they can do to be better in those situations. And she charges $10K per visit. So I guess Mel Tucker informed her that they're not going to be requiring her services anymore. And then the Detroit Free Press came out with a story saying that Brenda Tracy had no intention of going public and disclosing her identity within this case, and she was basically going to comply with Michigan State's investigation and agree to the confidentiality that they had agreed on. And until her name got leaked by reportedly a former Board of Trustees member, and that's how her name and her story got out there first, and that's where we arrived to where we are now, her and Mel Tucker within the he said, she said. So I just wanted to make sure I got all that information out there because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a long timeline. Fired, I don't think that Michigan State can fire him just because this is undecided as far as did he actually violate, I guess, like the sexual misconduct policy that they have. So they have to suspend him because they have to see this through, because let's say they do fire him and it comes out that, this is not true. They're going to owe him a lot more money in a lawsuit because he's going to sue them. So that's the thing where I think it's tricky for them is they're in a weird spot because we know Michigan State already has this very horrible spotlight on them, especially when it comes to, like sexual assault allegations with the whole Nassar thing and just everything that's gone on at their program. So they're in a very difficult situation. Now, I will say this, and maybe you'll ask me a follow-up question, but I'll let you answer, and then maybe we'll get into, what do you think about just the situation in general? Like, do you think this is something that actually happened? Do you think, Mel Tucker is telling the truth? Do you think Brenda Tracy is telling the truth? But I'll let you answer, should he be fired instead of suspended?
Well, I'll actually answer that question that you had brought up. I don't, I don't know. I mean, I would tend to believe her because I don't know. Some people might say, well, it's because now she's coming out because she's not being retained. But I mean, I lean toward believing her. You're right. It is a she said, he said thing. I would lean toward believing her, but I don't have all of the facts. So that's basically, kind of my answer there. In terms of should he have been fired instead of suspended, I think what Michigan State is looking at is the contract buyout, right? Yeah. He signed a 10-year extension worth $95 million. They'd still be on the hook for the buyout of $80 million. So the reason why they didn't fire him initially is they're going to line up all of their ducks to make sure that if they are going to fire him, that they can't do what you said, or he can't do what you said and turn around and sue him for breach of contract and say, hey, you owe me the $80 million. Because if it's in quotes here, a for cause firing, it would void the buyout on the remainder of his contract, which he just signed that extension back in November 2021. So we're not even 2 years in to the 10-year extension, which he still has $80 million on the buyout. So that is why they didn't fire him, because if they did and they didn't go through the due process, they may easily end up owing him all of that. Whereas now they can do the investigation, do the hearings, and if they feel that, hey, going back to what you said, hey, we're leaning toward what she said and not what he said, then they have a lot more evidence and a lot more support for their for cause firing in order not to have to pay the buyout. So I think they're methodically doing legally what they should do based, I believe, on like Title IX and everything with university policy. Now the question is, how will these hearings go? Again, who do we believe? Again, it is a she said, he said, unless they have the text messages, unless during the hearing some other evidence comes out. But me personally, I would lean toward, believing what she said, because I don't see why she would make things up or would twist what happened. I mean, just don't know, because remember too, she is a rape survivor too. So you hope that some of the things that have gone on, that it doesn't, impact her, considering, her history too.
Yeah. And I think that's the part where people are being very careful. To me, when I look at, because I've been just reading up on, everything that's been coming out, to me, if anybody really looks suspicious to me, I think it's Michigan State. And it's just because I think there's two things going on that are being merged together. The one thing is, we've already talked about, was this interaction between her and Mel Tucker consensual? And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think it's very hard to prove, whether it's she's telling the truth or whether he's telling the truth. I think the thing that's kind of in his favor is that it was over the phone, and they talked multiple times for long periods of time.
And when you brought that up, I'm sure people are like, oh, they've talked 28 times, half hour each time.
But but you're assuming all 28 times were sexual times. So
right. And what I was going to say was, hey, there has been a professional work relationship going for almost a year and a half, 2 years, and she has come to Michigan State multiple times. So,
but I did read that those calls in particular were after work hours. So, I mean,
but JT,
each situation is different, because that could be like if me and you work together, we're talking after hours. So,
but JT, when you're a college football coach like he is at Michigan State, you don't have work hours. Exactly.
He's
like
24/7.
You're dealing with player issues, injuries, media requests, like.
And I think that part of the details is, I think in the court of public opinion, I think that's what's having people maybe side with Mel Tucker a little bit more, because in people's minds it's like, well, if he did it the first time, why'd you call him 27 more times? Because that's what I've seen online. But
the 27,
I want to know the context of all those conversations. But I think that is what's helping Mel. Now, the one thing I will say that is
I don't think it necessarily helps them, because if someone's logical about it to say, hey, first 27 times, it was about work, it was about public speaking, it was about how players can be better, and then that 28th time he crossed the line. Or
could it be this? I think people are finding it logical because I think they're buying the story that they had a consensual relationship, and I think that's what people are believing, and that's why that 27 calls is kind of triggering people. But we'll find out. But the Michigan State part, to me, is the most damning.
It's a bad look. Either way,
it's a bad look, because this looks like a setup. So basically, what I read is, when this investigation started, they replaced some members on the board of trustees. So I'm assuming somebody got fired, and apparently, that person that was removed from that job is rumored to be the one that leaked these names to the press. So if a Michigan State employee that's on the board of trustees is privy to what's going on with this case that has not been made public, and both parties have agreed to keep it private while they conduct their investigation, and then now it's in the public, well, this sounds like you're trying to find a way to muddy Mel Tucker's name to get out of that buyout. So to me, Michigan State looks the worst, because That's the one thing consistently across the board that I see everyone agreeing on is that Michigan State is trying to find any way to get out of this contract. And to me, I feel like if Mel Tucker is 100% guilty of something that I'm saying, like, look, I know for sure he's guilty of, is being not smart and not reading the room. Like, you've looked at the message boards for 2 years. Like, people have been saying this contract is ridiculous. They want to see how they can get out of it. Like, that has been out there. And then the other thing is, you're married, and you know that's a bad look. And it's at Michigan State. Like, you're having an inappropriate relationship with an employee, you're married, and people don't want you to have this contract. Like, he's got to be able to read the room better and not put himself in that situation. So I think it's a he said, she said. I think we'll see what happens, but I think Michigan State looks horrible in this situation. And like you said, I think that's why they haven't fired him yet. They really got to get their ducks in a row because they're playing with fire right now, and they could end up owing him more money than they would if they would have to just buy him out.
Yeah, well, I think the whole contract is what they're trying to get out of as well, and maybe this ends up being the for cause that they were looking for. I don't know if it's a setup or whatever. It
feels like one. I'm just being honest. It feels like one.
I mean, that would be like, then she's part of it, and it's just,
no. I'm not necessarily.
I
don't think she's a part of it. I think Michigan State is being opportunistic with the situation, and I don't think.
But they wouldn't need to have leaked her name. I mean, either way, it wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know, but well, if their names don't get leaked and they settle this privately, like, how do they get out of the contract? Like, I think the only reason that they are gaining steam to get out of this contract is because now this story is out in the media. It's out in public.
But if they wanted to get rid of the contract, they wouldn't have it go away quietly.
But they have to do an
investigation. She hasn't filed a civil suit against Mel Tucker, has she? I don't think.
Not that I know of.
Okay. So the allegations were brought to the university. They now have to do their due process. It would be like anything. If a student came to them with similar accusations, they can't just sweep it under the rug. We saw that happen at Baylor. That's the whole thing. Like, that's why they need to do this.
This is a very, very unique case, and I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm just saying right now, Michigan State, you look bad. Please do your due diligence and make the right decision, and we'll see whatever that is. All right, so you ready to go to college football recap? I know you've been waiting for this. All right, so we're heading into week 3 of college football. Let's quickly go back over the past 2 weeks by playing the college football version of the check down game. So we're going to start this off with bigger surprise. Oh, I know you love this. University of Miami Hurricanes, the real Miami, not that one in Ohio, or Texas A&M.
Oh, the bigger surprise is Miami. We've seen this from A&M. Top 25, number 1 recruited class, number 2 recruited class, Jimbo Fisher. They brought in a new OC. It's going to be great. And what they do? Nothing. And we haven't seen this from Miami. We actually look like the more physical team, the more in shape team, the more explosive team. And that's supposed to be an SEC powerhouse. So, it's Miami.
I agree with you. It's Miami. And I knew we were better than that team when we were getting targeting type hits and they picked up the flags for us. I'm like, oh, Miami's got respect now. The refs are like, yeah, you're the better team. But you're right. Like, everyone knew A&M was on the verge of collapse. So that's not a surprise. What really shocked me with Miami is, we talk about this all the time, these are the games that Miami will lose over the last decade. Like clockwork. It's a ranked opponent, tough game. We're going to find a way to lose it. And what do? As the game goes on, and you laughed at me because I texted you in halftime. And what did I say? I said Miami will win like 45-28. You're like, you're just gloating.
I don't listen to you.
Yeah, you don't. You should, because I'm always right. And what do? They proceed to come out and dominate the second half. That is probably the best half of football I've seen us play in 5 or 6 years. So definitely Miami
probably since the Mark Richt 10-2 season.
Yeah, since that fraudulent 10-2 season that doesn't fit with everything else. I don't know how we did that, and just to lose to Pitt on Thanksgiving. But yeah, I agree with you. Bigger surprise. This one's interesting. Colorado, who everyone's surprised, but Washington State, undefeated, ranked, and they beat my Wisconsin Badgers. Bigger surprise.
Oh, I think it's Washington State. That takes nothing away from what Colorado is doing. They've been really good. But think about Washington State. Bro, do you know who their quarterback is? Because we all know who Colorado, their quarterback is. I know. Do you?
Is it Michael Penix? Who is it?
It's Cam Ward. He was at Incarnate Word of the FCS Like he transferred from there, right? Do you know who their coach is over at Washington State? Because we know who Colorado's quarterback and who their coach is, Jake Dickert. So like Washington State, no one knows about. No, and they're playing the Pac-12 after dark games. At least Colorado's getting on noon
I call them the
on
strip club
Fox,
games.
right? Noon on Fox on Colorado. So I'm going Washington State.
I'm going to pick Colorado State for all the reasons you said. You act like Colorado doesn't have two FCS players coming up and doing the same thing. Like Shedeur Sanders,
they would have never.
I get it.
Have gone there if it wasn't for Dion.
I get it, but they're there. And here's the difference for me. Like these are both impressive. Like
but the other thing is, you knew their names. No one knows Cam Ward.
Washington State I actually heard of him, but I didn't know that's where he was. Washington State's been impressive, but the expectations and pressure that Colorado has had before they even played a game, Washington State has nowhere near that.
How is that a surprise?
I'm saying the fact that they are undefeated with these expectations, this pressure. It's Colorado, man.
Again, it's nothing to take away from Colorado.
You sound like you're taking a lot away from Colorado right now.
Wisconsin is the better of any of the two teams that Colorado has faced.
Colorado just played a team that went to the national championship a year ago. Don't try to use my words against me. TCU. TCU. No. Don't you can't use my analysis to make the point unless you say no. You gotta say JT, you were right first. Say it and then you can use
about what?
I told you TCU was not going to be good this year.
Please.
Exactly.
Said they would be good.
You did. You were like, nah, TCU, they went to a championship, they'll be good. Now, I never thought I'd be talking about this. Bigger surprise. Iowa's offense or Duke's offense?
How is Iowa's offense a surprise? They scored 17 and 24. I mean, I guess compared to last year's 3
That's what I'm saying.
I'm going to go Duke. They scored 28 on Clemson. Like Iowa is only a surprise because they were so pitiful last year on offense. So I'll give Duke credit. You got to give them props. Come on.
I mean, I want to give Iowa the props. I think they've raised their points per game from 17 to I think 20 this year. So, and they only scored 20 points,
an extra field goal
games last year. So, I mean, it might be reversed by the time the season's over. But yeah, it's Duke. They destroyed Clemson. Their quarterback, everyone's saying, is a legit first-round pick now. And then I never even heard of this kid. Now, every time I go on social media, I'm seeing all his highlights of all this other athletic stuff that he could do before he got to Duke. This dude's doing windmill dunks. Like, he's a super athlete. Like, yeah, I think Duke's offense is impressive. It's like, is Cutcliffe still there? I just got to make sure because if the quarterback whisperer is not there and Duke is playing like this, I know obviously
Cutcliffe is not there anymore.
He's only working the Manning Pass Academy. But think about it, like people think of Duke's success with Cutcliffe on offense. And it's like Duke looks good. Like I know Miami, we're doing good right now, but I'm worried about Duke. Like I hope you don't have to play them what week.
Mike Elko is a really good coach. If you don't know that name, you will get to know it soon.
All right, let's go. Most impressive so far, Shedeur Sanders or your guy, Michael Penix Jr.?
I mean, listen, you can't go wrong with whoever you pick. They've both been impressive. How could you not? So if I can't say both, I'm going to go with my guy, Michael Penix Jr., just because I picked him to win the Heisman. So keep doing your thing, man. Keep doing your thing. Make the Don look great.
Turn back into Indiana Michael Penix and misses the season. Just so he can be right about this one thing. Yeah, you're right. You can't be wrong with any of these answers. I'm going to go with Shedeur just because he made the jump up from FCS. I think people were really unsure about the depth of this roster, and I think they had some high-profile games out the gate. So I think what he's done is just amazing. So, but it's both. Like Penix might win the Heisman, and Shedeur might be in New York with him. So we could both be right about this. Oh, this one's sensitive. More impressive so far, Texas or FSU? I know where you're going with this, just because you're a hater. You're not objective. But go ahead.
I want to know which writer, because the writers are on strike even for our show. Like, who put this one in here? Must have been you, because I would never have okayed the FSU one. And the answer is Texas. FSU already beat LSU last year. Like, why are we surprised? Like, LSU might fall a little bit.
You literally called them the team that will disappoint.
Texas.
In our previous show.
Texas.
So now we're just like, oh yeah, FSU was always going to ball out. You literally said they would not do this.
Can I say my answer?
Can you back up your lie? Go ahead.
Can I do it? Yes. Can I double down on
This boy
like
backpedaling like
everyone
Dion in his
thought
prime. Go ahead.
everyone thought Texas would do the usual, like, oh, they're back, but they're gonna collapse against Bama. Yo, they took it to Bama at Bama. So how is
They
that
took it to
not
Jalen
impressive?
Milroe.
Come on, like how is that not impressive? Because we saw FSU win 10 games last year. When's the last time we saw Texas look that good and dominant against a really good team? Like, come on.
It's close, but I'm gonna go with FSU just because think about where FSU was like 3 years ago. Like they were right. They were right on the cliff with us, and we were both about to fall off, and somehow we fell by ourselves.
They pushed us and saved themselves.
They pushed us and became a top 3 team. Like they left us, got a supermodel, and now they're in Hollywood. Like this is a top 3 team in the country, and just 3 years ago they were the same as UM. That's more impressive to me. I'm sorry.